damage and your comms laser has activated. Initiate short range control. Activating short-range attack gear.
The setup for Nier Automata is that in 5012 AD, aliens invaded with an army of machines and took the Earth by storm, forcing the humans to retreat to the moon. 200 years later, in 5204 AD, humans counterattacked with Project Yorha, their own army, but one of androids being made and shipped out of orbiting bases. However, even after 12 attempts to take the Earth back, they are still unsuccessful. This is where 2B, an early combat model android, begins her journey on Earth, working with all their allies and systematically destroying machines. For the first 25 hours, the player will be 2B, a stalwart, no-nonsense soldier in the war against machines, accompanied by a less faithful, more advanced, and endlessly curious android, 9S. 2B plays like your typical Platinum Games character. She's agile, quick, powerful, and versatile. The majority of the gameplay is third-person melee combat, but a drone will float by that holds your weapons when not in use, can shoot rapid-fire projectiles, and can be equipped with certain special moves, such as one that will shoot several spears out of the ground and stab into your enemies. 2B has a heavy and light weapon attack, and can change between many weapons. The combination of these factors and having complete control at every point is very enjoyable, especially when it's so outlandish and fun, such as the character flipping around and using swords taller and wider than they are. You can also ride large animals, including moose, anywhere. Upon reaching the end of 2B's story, you play from the beginning of the game, but this time from 9S's perspective. This is mostly the same story experienced by 2B, as they are companions throughout their journey, however with an added layer of depth. He has only a light attack, but through 9S's more advanced android body, he's able to hack into machines to do major damage, or taking control of them, while perhaps on accident actually peering into their minds. Hacking plays like a 2D shooter, where the player will take out a core, which has many variations, and will increase in difficulty depending on the machine, but will become somewhat automatic the more it's played. The player will also have insights into the machines that will come about after defeating major enemies, where the player will get backstories or will view picture books upon entering certain areas that expand and point out the themes of the game to the player. There are also times when 9S is alone, and these especially are when you get to see a more empathetic and understanding side of an android, partly because he's a more sophisticated model, and partly because he can literally peer into others' minds, including his own. This storyline only really takes 10 hours, as many major plot points take place without 9S, so he skips a lot. I think it is also important to note that this shows Yoko Taro's diligence towards context in video games over brevity, as it only makes sense for someone who can hack into minds to learn these detailed stories of the world when only memories of these events remain. Especially considering what we would probably have in its place is the villain explaining everything about themselves and their plan before they're defeated in typical anime fashion. For example, saving, which is an unassuming and typical video game convention, is contextualized in Nier through these servers that exist on Earth that store all memories and data from the android when you go there, and transfer them to the main servers on the bunker in space. And these also contain map data for the nearby areas that they're in. These will also serve for transport between the bunker and the Earth. The third and final storyline is seen through A2. This takes place immediately after the events of the first two's story, in a sense being the second half of the game. A2 is an even earlier model than 2B, but has been exiled from Yorha for some unknown betrayal, so we see the perspective of one who is spurned by what she thought to be the only truth in the world. While initially she plays much like 2B, with a heavy and light weapon attack, she also has a berserker mode, which for a limited time allows her to have a major increase to damage, but leaves her vulnerable afterwards it is possible to heal during this process to keep the Berserker mode going longer. What you will notice playing is that it is constantly shifting between different styles of Gradius 2-person to 3-person bullet hell to 3D melee combat, but elements of all of these exist in each. While battling someone with swords, you'll be dodging lasers and orbs, while weaving through bullet paths in 2D, you'll slice through enemies. I feel the need to also discuss the difficulty, as this will be the first choice you make that affects the game. There are 4 choices, and I would urge people to pick neither of the extremes, as easy makes it so the player has to learn very few game mechanics and just spam the attack button the whole time. And very hard kills you in one hit, so this is obviously for masochists, as it is often a bullet hell game. So, the real issue for me is between normal and hard. While normal is mostly a pleasant experience, you will be challenged at certain times, specifically in boss fights. But I never had to become particularly skilled at many of the mechanics. In hard, I had to adapt much more to the different types of enemies in the game, and I learned more about different mechanics. This was very enjoyable for me, but I would say if this is the first time you'll be playing a game like this, to avoid the frustration of bullet mania, just go normal. But for any seasoned gamer, I would recommend hard. The main message of this game is the effect of perspectives, so no one android or machine in this story is wrong or right, even though so many of them clash on opposite sides of an issue. The player explores, through the story, how important it is to understand your own reason for doing something, and how important it is to understand your fellow beings' plights and backgrounds. So many times while playing a game, I find myself hearing excellent music, but I don't understand how it fits into the game. Even if I do enjoy the experience of listening to excellently composed instrumentals and vocals, no game I've played recently has so well integrated it into the game as Automata. So let's explore how it's used. Upon approaching the village through the city ruins, one of the earlier areas in the game, it's just diegetic noise of the leaves and wind. Then upon climbing the ascent into a giant interconnected treehouse village, clapping and snapping begin in an upbeat foundation. Then upon climbing further into the fort, intros primitive low drums and a strumming guitar that gives the place a campfire feel. It makes it intimate and joyful. That, by the time the childlike vocals kick in to drive home the wonder and hopefulness of this place, I'm in awe. The park is a similar experience to the village, but even more stratified.
What are those?
As the park can be seen from so far away, the noises can also be heard from a great distance. So immediately from leaving the Machine Tree Fort, one sees the towering Disney-esque castle with the negative space being shaped like a heart, which could be very significant imagery for a machine-occupied human amusement park. I digress. But the player hears fireworks from this great distance. Upon arriving in one of the back alleys of this area, quiet piano keys play a fragmented melody, and machine whirring and clanking can be heard in the background. But once the player steps out onto the main street, the instrumentals and the vocals kick in, combined with the visuals of robots parading in the street, dancing together, throwing confetti in the air. One immediately feels the pure joy of being in this park, and how the robots could be drawn to this area. What is most surprising is that these tracks have a quiet, medium, and dynamic variation for the player's movement, and aids the story by providing a greater context for the characters, even to the point that when hacking a very simplistic minigame, there are 8-bit versions of these songs, to show that the music is not only pleasant sounds, but permeates into the very beings of these machines. It is a manifestation of how they feel and why they do the things they do. To close out music, thank you Keiichi Okabe and your continued service to better video games. The game runs consistently at a smooth 60 frames per second, with no glitches as far as I've noticed, and I believe this is in part due to how small the game map is, so it's easier to perfect, which some other games could definitely take notes from. Now, there are some things I don't like about the game, and it comes into play here mostly. Some of the textures in the environment draw my attention away from the setting and onto a tree that looks like a plastic mold, even when you're right next to it. It's not just when it's at a distance. And the same thing goes for textures on like brick walls or buildings. Even by the time you get really close to it, you always see textures load in. Yoko Taro is not just a great video game director, he is a master of the craft, which is seen in his ability to blend many genres into one and still make it feel natural. The cohesiveness of the game is something I so rarely see, that I'm not just playing a game, but understanding the nature of it, and can truly feel the ideas that it presents to me. Because he is so involved in the game, it is not disjointed. It is a cohesive whole. 10 out of 10.